Today I wanted to show you how I paint worn leather belts and satchels. This will be a leather that is soft, not shiny, but it's soft and worn. So here we have the colors that I usually use for such things. So the base color, the darkest color, will be Rhinox hide, but I add a little navy blue to it to add even more depth, because it's not that dark, and also add just brown leather because it's a little brighter and less saturated, maybe to red. Then for highlights I use Morphrang brown, Iroko and Birch from Scale. Those two colors maybe aren't the color of leather that is very present, but I use them only for the marks of the leather being worn, some places that it's torn, maybe broken, so you can see the inside of the leather element that isn't colored. And for this the color Iroko is very important, so it looks very natural.
"12 seconds later."
Okay, so here we have our Space Marine that we painted earlier, and I wanted to show you how to paint his bolt pistol holster. Using the earlier technique that I showed you, we'll make it that the holster has scratches, worn marks, and is generally used and destroyed. So I want to show you how I paint a worn leather effect on his gun holster. So looking at him from this side, we can see the main light source that we sketched earlier. So and you can see the sketch here on the armor. So you can see that there will be light on this place, on this part, and also here, and it will come from this side, from above. So the upper part of the holster will be generally brighter, and here, and the lower it gets, it will be darker, so we will add shadows. I've base coated the whole holster with Rhinox hide, so it's now it's a dark brown color. So we can add a little more shadow in the places that we want to. So using the mixture of Rhinox hide and navy blue, we can add some darker lines like here, just to mark the place that the armor is touching the holster. Also in this place and in this recess, just to add more depth and shadow. Also we can add a little more shadow, darker color, to the end of the holster, yeah, here. And you can do it with dots, maybe more grazing, yeah. So this will generate more contrast later on. So now we can start highlighting. Of course we can make a sketch, but it's a small surface, so most of the time it's not that needed. So you can just start highlighting, and also brown colors cover very well on dark surfaces. So now just let's focus on highlighting this part a little, and maybe this edge. As normally, just with the side of the brush on larger surfaces. And here, and also the edge highlights. So you can see that I'm covering less and less surface with each tone that is brighter, but we want to focus on this edge highlights to leave it a little. Even on the bottom you can add some scratches maybe that are darker, but they will be visible compared to the darker stone that we placed there earlier. So yeah, just do it a little at random. As earlier, we added some lines, some scratches, and the surface, the more you random patterns you will add, the more they will overlap at the end and generate a richer surface. So let's add more highlight. Okay, so starting from the next highlight, we will start adding more scratches, more dots, especially on the edges, just to mark more signs of the material being worn. So you can see that I'm adding it with small lines, dots, as we've done earlier. It's very important to understand that this holster will be worn probably the most on this line, because it's more prone to being scratched by his maybe movement of his arms, and also especially here where it's a place when the bolt pistol will touch, and maybe when being holstered it will wear the surface. So try to do it in a logical way, then it will be more believable. So you can see the small scratches, dots with the tip of the brush. Maybe a little here. Yeah, and let's go to the brighter tones. So you can see that it's a moderately fast process. We just need a good base that is mostly smooth, and then we add only signs of the material being worn. Okay, and as I mentioned earlier, we want to focus on this place, because here there will be more light. And try using the final highlight as to accent maybe some parts that you've generated, maybe lines earlier, just to add more depth to all the signs of the material being worn. So you can of course spread those dots a little, but try to overlap the earlier ones, maybe use the earlier ones and make the scratches even more visible, stronger. Yeah. Okay, and this is it for this side. We of course can maybe, if you think you've overdone it, you can go back a few shades to some base colors to some and some maybe cover with a thin layer just to go back with the base color of the leather. As I mentioned it earlier, it's important to not to overdo it. We also can deepen the shadows on the bottom just with dots. And the next thing is that we can also highlight this part a little, because it will catch a little more light, because it's an edge, but it won't catch that much light as the edges that are very prone to catch light. So a little on the bottom, maybe moderately bright just to the base tone, but you can see the edge. Generally you can edge highlight everything, but it's very important to when making edge highlights, it's very important to add more light, more shadow to them, because not everywhere they will be so bright. Somewhere there are some places that the edge highlights won't be that bright. They will be dark. Okay, you can even add a line here just to so you can see this side is finished. Now let's go to this side, yeah, because this is our second view. Here we can see the back of the armor, and the light situation is a little different. So now we want to generate more shadow here on this part, and here on the bottom, and also here and here. There will be more light in this direction, and on this, especially on those edges. So we want to add it. So now let's start as earlier. Let's start adding shadows. You can even go higher with them, because they will generate a dark outline when looking from the back on the miniature. Also, there will be more shadow under his arm, so we can add it here. And here in the middle. Also here on the line, combining the elements. It's important to combine all the elements on a miniature with dark lines, but I don't use black for it, because for me it generates a feeling of a comic book, and we want to combine. I want to combine the elements with colors that are similar with the elements. So here on this miniature, it will be, most of the time, it will be additions of blue just to darken the miniature. But you can see he has a blue armor. The general vibe of the miniature will be in blue tones, because the armor is a very prominent piece. So if we would, to every element that we are painting, if we would add a little blue to the deepest shadow, here we have brown, but adding blue will generate the feeling that those elements will combine more naturally, and the shadow will be more believable, not that black. Most of the time black is color that is doesn't isn't warm and isn't cold. So we want to, even to black, we want to add some other colors just to give it a temperature, so it won't be a hole in the miniature. Okay, so now we have the deep shadow, and now we can only highlight as earlier. So you can see on smaller surfaces it's doable, it works. On bigger surfaces it's better to make a light sketch, so you can highlight more easily and achieve stronger contrast. and then also the outline here. It's very important because here also it's a surface that is very it can be destroyed easily because of the opening of the holster by hands. Also, you can see that the holster has it's a little soft, so it has some shadows here, 2 of them. We can use this. They are not visible now, but we can add highlights so that they will start to be visible. So let's do it. Even there are places on miniatures that are totally flat, but we can add a natural feeling of folds to it to add more detail and change the appearance of the surface. I do this sometimes. I'll do this when painting skin tones. I add wrinkles, skin folds, especially on places where the arms bend. Also on materials. Sometimes materials are sculpted in a very basic way, so we can add some details to them. So you can see that I'm focusing on this ridge here and here, just to add more detail, and you can see the shadows that are beginning to be visible. Also at this point we can add some scratches, maybe some random patterns, just to add more depth, just to add more detail. As I mentioned it earlier, we want to focus on this edge here. As earlier on the other side, we can make a little edge highlight on the bottom, but don't overdo it. We don't want it to be that bright. And now let's highlight it even more. Also, the one thing that I maybe discovered some time ago, as I mentioned it, now I only use bigger brushes for bigger surfaces, because they cover larger surfaces easily, but smaller brushes have a sharper tip. Even if the big brush has a sharp tip, it holds a lot of paint in it and a lot of water, so most of the time I wasn't able to achieve a very sharp surface, sharp details with a big brush. And now most of the time such small things I'm painting only with a 0-0 brush. It's very easy to generate dots and scratches with this one. So you can see them, I'm adding some brighter highlights, so they will be even more visible now. You can add some random things. Maybe this one is too big, so we can go back a little and cover it with a darker tone, so it won't be that visible. You can always go back and fix things. add more dots. Okay. So we are focusing on the edge. Here there will be more light. The surface will be more will show more wear and tear. Some small scratches. Maybe some dots here and there. So you can see that the only thing that it's left, we should add two final highlights. So let's focus only on this place and maybe here. With this color, it's a mix of beige and Iroko. We can add a little highlight. So you can see that it's getting stronger just here. Also we can add additional dots as we've done earlier, maybe some places that are worn. Also, as on an earlier example, you can see that the contrast on those elements is very big, but you can see that it's you can see the torn inside of the skin. And the final highlight with beige only on this edge. Here there will be a lot of light reflected, and that's it. So you can see that we have more shadow in this part and more highlight in this. But looking at him from the back side, you will see that most of the holster is visible here, and with this dark line we generate a shadow coming from his hand, and also a dark outline that gives us contrast. If you would paint all those elements brighter, then those elements won't be shining that much. If you want, we can of course add some scratches here to fill the surface, that it won't be that dark and empty. But I would suggest only doing it to maybe this color, not further, because then it will lessen the big contrast that we have now. So we can add some little dots and scratches here and there, maybe close to the edge, just to add a little detail. Maybe we don't want the surface to be that empty, but all in all this is sufficient. And the same we can replicate on those pouches. Just think about the outline of those pouches, because there will be more places that are prone to being worn, and in the middle the skin can have dots and scratches, but that's all. So thank you for your attention and have fun experimenting with this technique.